All right, everybody. Thank you for joining today. My name is Eric Henderson, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Today, we're going to be discussing security in the age of ransomware. This is a topic near and dear to my heart. It's a huge deal for pretty much any security-conscious business person, and certainly anyone in the field that is related to technology. So, we'll start with a little information about me. My name is Eric Henderson. I am Rocket IT's VCIO. VCIO stands for Virtual Chief Information Officer. I serve as a fractional or outsourced CIO for Rocket IT's clients. So if you have a business and you're not large enough to need a full-time CIO because you don't have the budget or things to keep them busy or amount of work to take up 40 hours a week, then we provide a service that can fill in the gaps there and cover what you do need in the interim. But today, we're going to be talking about ransomware. And like any good discussion, we need to talk about some definition of terms. Many of these terms are very IT nerd specific. And usually when IT nerds have a bunch of terms, non-technical people don't really have to learn them. And that's good because we have our own lingo, we have our own verbiage and acronyms and abbreviations. This term, however, has had such devastating effects on businesses around the world that it's become very important to understand what the actual threats are, have an understanding of what they can do to you, and then maybe a soft understanding of which one is most likely to happen and what you need to protect against. So let's start with the term ransomware. Ransomware is by far the one that has taken the media by storm. There have been a number of very wide-reaching, very heavily publicized reports in the business news media, most notably WannaCry and Petya. Both of these have caused very large organizations you would expect to have very strong security like airports and hospitals, to face fines into the mid to high 6 digits. I think the largest fine I've seen so far is $660,000. And so what's happening there is, think of a normal ransom. So somebody takes something or somebody kidnaps something and they say, I'm not going to give you this back until you pay X amount of dollars and you have until this date to do it. Ransomware on a computer is the software automated form of that. So I'm going to take all the files on your computer and every computer on your network that computer can see, so your servers and any databases you have and any sort of backups that it can see, and it's going to render those unusable by encrypting them. So basically they're going to lock the file and they're going to be the only one that has the key. Once they've done this, they will communicate to you either by email or by a pop-up on the screen saying, hi, we've taken over your network and all of your important files, whether those are personal, business, it doesn't matter, are now inaccessible. And if you'd like access to them back, that's great. We'd love to give you access back, but it will be somewhere between $100, $200, $300 up into thousands, and then in very large organizations all the way up into 6 digits. So this is directly illegal, obviously. This is a form of extortion. This is taking someone's business hostage and then demanding money to fix it. And so this causes immediately an outage, but a whole bunch of other problems that we're gonna speak to along the way. Now, we also have to talk about 3 other types of attacks because they are equally important and almost more likely to cause financial harm. Phishing, spear phishing, and spoofing. So phishing, spelled with a PH, simply means pretending to be an authority, such as Facebook, Google, the IRS, the FBI, and asking users that are typically less technical and not as likely to think that this kind of thing happens, and saying, hey, we need to change your password, so log onto this website and change your password. Problem is, the website that they're being sent to is not actually the authority that they think it is. It's someone made to look like it. They gather the user's password, and now, using that password, they can access various accounts and open credit cards, place orders, use it to gain access to other systems to put ransomware attacks in place. what have you. The next item is spear phishing. Spear phishing is where phishing itself is more like a kind of a spray, kind of like shooting a shotgun and hitting a bunch of different places and hoping one of the things hits. Spear phishing is much more like a rifle. Spear phishing, a enterprising hacker will log onto your website or log into LinkedIn. They will find the highest ranking accounting person, so CFO, controller, accounting manager, depends on the size of the organization. Then they will find the email address of the CFO or the CEO or the owner or the founder. Then they will send a fake email from the CEO to the real accounting professional saying, please wire this money to this account right now. In some percentages of business, if the accounting manager is afraid of the CEO or the owner or otherwise doesn't want to question them, sometimes that order will be carried out without the CEO even knowing that it happened and without the CFO or the accounting manager taking any steps to verify that it's true. So there's been into the thousands of cases. We've seen one instance of this happen with a client of ours where they send the money and never think twice about it. And we're going to talk about how to prevent that, because that's a lot different than, you know, just somebody trying a random attack. That's somebody specifically targeting you. The fourth thing we're going to talk about is spoofing. So spoofing is another one of those IT industry terms where I send you an email, but I make the email appear to have been sent by someone who's not me. So due to the way that email was originally conceived, email was never designed to be used for all business communication of any sort of confidentiality. Email was designed as kind of a, hey, this is kind of neat. And so there's never really any strong security put in place. So if I want my email to say that it's from Barack Obama or Donald Trump, I can do that. I can make it say that. Now, of course, you probably would expect neither of those people to be emailing you, so you would expect it to be fake. But if I made that email look professional and I said it was from Facebook's security team, and you had a Facebook account, and maybe you've seen some stuff about security in the news, and you've seen your friend's Facebook's getting hacked, then you might click on it without even thinking about it before your any sort of internal critical thinking systems has said, no, probably shouldn't click that. So this is pretty much the threat landscape right now. These four things, if you've been in business for any length of time and you have any sort of presence on the internet, either email or a website, guaranteed one, if not all four of these attacks have been launched, hopefully unsuccessfully, at your business. This is, preventing that is really the goal of this webinar. It's a personal passion of mine, and it's something that is pretty much always going to be around and always going to be a problem. So let's get into some interesting details of how this actually happens. So MailChimp, you might have heard of MailChimp. MailChimp is a company that lets you send out marketing emails to many, many people at once. So I can send an email to 20,000 customers all at once about a new promotion I'm doing, and MailChimp gives me an easy way to do that. MailChimp themselves has email that is being spoofed to appear that it's from MailChimp. They're borrowing MailChimp's authority to make it appear that MailChimp sent the email. They know a lot of people do business with MailChimp. People wouldn't expect an attack to come from a company that's smaller like that, not a giant like Google or Facebook. And so this is this tweet right here is from June 29th, 2017. So very, very recent. Just a brief aside here, the slide deck here, I love the photography in here. It was put together by our wonderful marketing specialist, Jackie McFadden. And this is my favorite slide in the whole deck. It's got the screen mask, it's got the glasses on top of that, and it's got somebody working on a computer. So let's talk about horror stories for a minute. We have seen a great number of these types of attacks. As I mentioned, we had a client who was targeted by one of those spear phishing attacks where somebody sent the accounting manager a request as if it appeared from the owner, and the accounting manager, for whatever reason, said, hey, I'm not going to question that. If somebody asks me to do something, I'm going to do it. And they wired the money. Now, fortunately, and I guess it's due to either the FBI or the banking system safeguards, the wire was able to be stopped, as in the bank approved it, but the money wasn't actually lost. So our client ended up being very lucky. Interestingly, the path to preventing that, there's not very much from an IT perspective that can be done to prevent that. That's more of a process problem, and we'll talk about the difference between technology problems and people problems here in just a minute. That is 100% a people problem. We've also seen, I saw a email conversation where somebody had gotten hit with ransomware, and they emailed the people that sent the ransomware and said, hey, come on, man, I live in a poor country, you're asking for $400, I only make $200 a month, how am I supposed to pay this? And the response was baffling. It was an email that looked like it was from a customer support team at a technology corporation. It said, yeah, we encrypted your files, our campaign in your country wasn't near as profitable as we were really hoping for, and so we are going to unencrypt your files, and if you'd like to donate to us, no big deal. Here's our link to be able to give us money, which was just confusing on so many different levels. I mean, you encrypted my files and then you unencrypted them for free, and now you want a donation. So what's happening is criminals, people that have any sort of technology background that are willing to do illegal actions often in other countries, have realized that this is an incredibly profitable venture. There's a lot of money to be made in this. And as a result, we don't think it's ever going to go away. In years past, if you managed to hack somebody's server, yeah, you might send a couple million spam emails out and then get stopped, but you're probably not going to see any money from that. With these attacks, it's glamorous, it works. People pay these ransoms every day, and we'll talk about why they do that. And so let's switch gears here a little bit. So far, I've given an overview of what ransomware is, the specific types of ransomware, and then specific stories of what's been happening with it. I imagine if you are well connected in the business world, if you ask some of your colleagues, it's very likely that one or more of them could say, oh yeah, that happened to me, that happened to a buddy of mine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You joined this webinar not for me to tell you what ransomware is and what you need to be worried about, but more what to do about that. And so what we're really describing there is our security methodology. So we do this in a kind of set of layers. So there are there's three main layers: technology, people, and planning. We're going to describe the elements of a technology strategy first at a very high level. Obviously, this isn't going into the depths of how to actually do this, but this is more what it is. Then we'll get into people, the specific considerations around training and process control and testing. And then we'll talk about planning, proactive things you can do that in the event of an actual emergency, that emergency is much less of an impact on your business than it might have had to be. So let's start with technology. Actually, let me go back. So starting with technology, the best security in technology is not any one product. There is no one single product that I could possibly even recommend that if you installed this on your server, or you had us implement for you, or you went out and got somebody to implement it for you, that would magically fix it. The nature of these threats changes so rapidly that any one company and any one type of security just isn't going to do the job. If anyone tells you that, I would strongly question whether that's the case. The best security is always going to be multiple layers. And when we say layers, what we're talking about is different vendors, so different brands of products, and installed on different things. So we don't want the same company all the way up and down the network, because if that company has some sort of vulnerability or failure, then your entire network is compromised. If you had three different companies and one has a problem, you still have the other two layers. The second one of that is we want it installed on different things. So we don't want to put eggs in the basket of trying to prevent attacks on just workstations. We have to worry about the entire network. We have to worry about email. We have to worry about files and folders, and we have to worry about individual workstations. So the layers are both which brand you use and where it's installed. So the four main elements of that are antivirus. This is probably the one that everyone understands the best. This has been around for decades. This is almost fully a commodity at this point. The number of antivirus platforms there are is probably 15 or 20, and there are excellent ones. The we recommend and the one that we install on all of our client networks is called ESET. That's E-S-E-T. And we have it to be, we've tried probably 6 different vendors in the 10 years I've been working with Rocket IT. And unless something major happens with that, I expect we'll be on ESET for a very long time. Number 2, firewall level protection. So antivirus is all good and well, but imagine the following situation. You have 20 computers. 15 of those are in the office. 5 of those are with people that work from home. One day you say, hey staff, we're going to install a new antivirus on all of your computers. I need all the people that work from home to come to work on this day. Well, let's say 2 of them are sick on this day, and just as an oversight, it never gets installed on those 2 people's computers. So now you have 18 computers with antivirus and 2 computers without it. Good news, you managed to cover 90% of your computers. Bad news, you have a major security threat for those 2 people that work from home. So the second layer that we want to add on to antivirus is firewall level protection. So we want all employees at all points to be behind a firewall that is aware of security threats and does things to actively block them. So much like antivirus, the ways to do this have multiplied greatly as this threat has become more real and more expensive to manage. And there are a number of brands that are very strong in this. We recommend and use SonicWall and Cisco. Both of them have very powerful solutions that have proven themselves to be very effective over long periods of time. The third thing is filters. So antivirus and putting things on firewalls is very reactive. It's basically saying, let's wait till somebody attacks us and then block them once they're doing it. It doesn't really do very much to proactively prevent the problem from even happening in the first place. So a strong filter for a variety of different types of content is a big deal. So the most common form of this is a spam filter. I'm sure all of you have some form of spam filter. It's a built-in solution for every cloud-based email platform, and it's almost impossible to use email without it if you didn't have one. So what's nice about a spam filter is, yes, it blocks spam, but what you may not have known is that many of these attacks are email-based, and so as spam filters have improved and become more sophisticated, they've done an excellent job of also blocking viruses, blocking attacks. So there's 2 main filters we're talking about here. One is a spam filter. The second is a content filter. So most people, when we talk about content filtering, that sounds like you're going to block access to inappropriate for work websites, gambling, etc. But the content filter security options out there have grown to include, if I get a phishing email and it says, click on this email and give me your password. Let's say my spam filter doesn't catch it, my antivirus doesn't catch it. I click on the link. Content filters now exist to look at that website, check a whole bunch of parameters about it, some heuristics, some metadata about how it's structured, how long the domain's been registered, who it belongs to. And if it determines, hey, this isn't probably safe and you shouldn't put your password in, it will go ahead and just block access to that site. So where content filters in the past were built around, don't let my employees get to certain content, which some people have very strong opinions about either direction, newer content filters have realized, hey, we can be more valuable than that. We can also block access to specific security threats. The fourth thing, and these have only existed probably in the last year or 2, are what are called honeypots. So a honeypot in IT security language is basically bait. We are trying to trick an automated system into attacking the bait, and the honeypot software sits there and watches the bait, and if somebody attacks it, then the software automatically shuts down the attack. And so this is kind of a step up in sophistication. This is saying, okay, all the other layers have failed. We need to prevent the attack from doing as much damage as we can. And so the best way to do that is to set up an automated system so that when it happens, we instantly find out about it and we instantly start doing something about it. And so a much smaller number of companies offer this type of solution, and it's I mean, this probably has only existed in the last year because this attack's only a couple years old. So as a review, on the technology level, in terms of a security methodology, we've got antivirus, firewall, filters, and honeypots. That's all well and good. So let's say you did all those things. You say, Eric, thank you. I appreciate it. We've already got all 4 of those things. We're rocking and rolling. We're good to go. We don't need any of the rest of what you're going to say. That would be nice. The issue is, and certainly some of my colleagues in the IT world are very cynical on this matter, that all of that is technology. And technology is only as good as the people that are interacting with it. And in times past, IT professionals would say, yeah, you can't trust the users. The users are always going to click the link. They're always going to type their password in. They're always going to click the wrong thing. Whatever the thing is, they're going to find a way to click it. I take a much different view on that matter. I think the nature of attacks we're facing and the workforce today, maybe even differently than 20 years ago, has no choice but to adapt to these threats. The damage these things can cause, even if you have all those security things in place, if something manages to slip through, is massive. It risks putting the business or putting you out of business, and if not, at least having major delays and major loss of revenue, an incredible amount of stress, and very likely a loss in reputation. And so the second section of our methodology is really about people. It's about users. We want to make sure that our clients, and really anyone listening to this webinar, have a modern, thorough, effective way to ensure that all staff knows about the threats and starts doing something about that. So that all sounds great. How do you do that? So number 1, phishing tests. So this is a lot of fun. This is about as much fun as I ever really get to have in IT. We have a system where we can pretend to send everyone in your organization an attack that, if they manage to click the link, means they failed the attack. So we can send them an email that looks like it's a phishing attack, and we see how many users are susceptible to it, and we can tell which users it is. So we've had some fun with this. We usually see on the first go around, if I send this out to 100 users, 20 to 30 of them are going to click the link. Sometimes much more than that, depending on kind of the technology level of the different people in the organization. So in your organization, you've got, let's say you had 100 people. Most of the people understand, I'm not supposed to click the link. They're very wary. They're not going to do that. You have some people, and the problem is you don't necessarily know which ones it is, that will happily click any link that comes into their email. They will happily trust whatever the email says, even when they've been told not to. Knowing who those people are and what to do about it makes all the difference in the world, which brings us to the second thing, security training. So we do a phishing test. We figure out, 25 people clicked the link. That's bad. That means if an attack got through, 25 of our passwords would be compromised, and we wouldn't necessarily know which ones because people may not admit to it. So what do we do about that? Well, Rocket IT and a large number of other organizations provide security training where we will come out to users, we'll explain, hey, this is a phishing email. This is what it looks like. This is some of the characteristics of why it looks different than a normal email. This is why no one would ever ask for that information over email. We train them. And so now you have a neat little iterative process. You can actually see people improve. So let's say month 1, we do a phishing test. 25 people click it. Great. Users 1 through 25, please report to this security training. All 25 go to training. 3 months later, so month 4, we say, all right, let's do another phishing test. Oh, well, this time 12 people clicked it. Sounds bad, but you've improved by about 50%. Now we train those 12 people again, maybe get a little more in depth, a little more one-to-one on the training, so you make sure that they're really taking it to heart and understand. You wait 3 months. You do another phishing test. This time 2 people clicked it. That's an amazing improvement. Yes, you still have 2 people who clicked it, but the threat of how likely it is you are to get attacked has gone down substantially. You've gone from 25 people clicking it down to 2. And so these systems are not terribly expensive. It's fairly, I don't want to say basic, but it's fairly routine work. And so it's something that in the last year or two has really taken off. The third thing is process control. So this really has more to do with the attacks where people are trying to get you to wire money. This is less about clicking an email or not clicking an email. So if I sent you an email and I said, hey, I need you to wire $20,000 to this account immediately. If your organization doesn't have some sort of process that is exceptionally clear about who validates and who signs off on a wire transfer, then if you get nothing else from this webinar, go back to your accounting manager, your controller, and say, hey, I know we don't wire money very much, but we need a process for it to make sure that nobody can just wire money without verifying it, without a signature, or at bare minimum, a phone conversation with somebody that's authorized to actually do that. And that type of process control is another way to protect yourself against these types of attacks. Maybe you can't stop the email coming in, but you can stop the damage that comes out of it. Okay, so we've talked about technology, and now we've talked about people. So testing for phishing, security training, and then process control. Those three add an entirely different type of security beyond bits and bytes and security devices. Now, the third thing, and this potentially actually is more valuable and more expansive than everything I've said so far, is around planning. There are two types of plans that every business that wants to protect itself from risks should have. The first plan is a disaster recovery plan. The second plan is a business continuity plan, sometimes called a DRP, disaster recovery plan, and a BCP, business continuity plan. These are typically long, dry, boring documents that explain, hey, here's what we're going to do in the event of a disaster. Here's how we're going to make sure our business keeps running. Very large organizations spend an incredible amount of money making sure that this plan is up to date, that it would actually work, that they could lose their Southeast operations and the business wouldn't shut down. How it's relevant to you is that a small amount of effort relative to the risk goes an incredible way that if you are attacked in one of these ways, so if you do have a ransomware attack that encrypts all your files, you have a very clear plan and you have very clear accountabilities as to who does what. The beautiful thing is that either of these plans also works if you have a fire or if you have a critical staff member that is ill or happens to pass away or leaves the organization that it was critical for the organization to function. Ransomware is just one of the ways to get to having the need for a disaster recovery plan and a business continuity plan, but it is by no means the only thing that would trigger one. Okay, so let's get into some specifics here. Disaster recovery plan. Disaster recovery plan and business continuity plan are these multi-syllabic IT terms that everyone acknowledges, yeah, that'd be a great thing to have. I really would love to have one of those. Very few organizations, particularly on the smaller end, sub 500 employee organizations, actually spend any time in actually building it. The core difference between them, a disaster recovery plan answers the question, if a disaster happens, how do we go about getting online as quickly as possible? So what do we functionally do to fix the problem? We're not at all worried about how the business is going to run in the meantime. That's not the problem being faced here. Your average disaster recovery plan is going to be, hey, let's say that our server room floods or catches on fire, or there's an extended outage of power or internet to that facility, and basically we can't use it anymore to get our servers online. How do we very functionally, in a tested, controlled manner, make sure we know how to get back online as quickly as possible and as cost effectively as possible? So for the clients that are under our management, we have a very clear process that says if a server fails, we will do this, then we'll do this, then we'll do this, then we'll do this. That is a Rocket IT process. That's not a process of your particular organization. Your organization probably relies on all sorts of different services and vendors, and you may have different types of facilities that have all sorts of other bits of complexity that go far beyond what we could do just for the servers. It's a big deal. Second thing, business continuity plan. So business continuity plan is a much more complex, much more difficult process to go through. A business continuity plan says, in the event of a disaster, what do we do to make sure that business continues running? How do we stay continuous? How do we meet payroll? How do we invoice? How do we make sure that our individual employees can still get to all the meetings and appointments and deadlines that we are contractually obligated to keep? How do we receive money? How do we send money to our vendors? All of these questions, there are, depending on your organization, depending on the type of work you're doing, this goes from moderately to incredibly complex. But the amount of time it takes to build one of these plans is paid for dramatically in the event that you ever have to trigger it. And so these two work in concert. Generally speaking, a disaster recovery plan is going to be a component of a business continuity plan. A business continuity plan is going to require every level of, every division of management. We need to hear from operations, accounting, sales, the executive team, HR, IT, and we need to make sure all of those teams are working together and they understand. The disaster recovery plan, generally going to be a lot more operational and IT focused. The other teams don't have quite as much input there. So third layer, planning. So recap of this section, we talked about technology. We talked about from a very base level, kind of a low level of sophistication. You need antivirus. You need protection on the firewall level. You need some sort of filter and optionally a ransomware honeypot. Building from that, let's say you have all that locked and loaded. You don't need any help there. Users, you have people. These people are vectors to be attacked, and we've moved to an era where people can no longer ignore this. One way I like to say this is that every job is now a security job. So it used to be that if I wanted to be a service manager or an account manager or an AP clerk, great, I can just be really good at that. Well, something changed in the last 5 to 10 years where now every job has to be very security conscious about what they're doing, particularly if they interact with money. Third layer, planning. So this has the bonus of going far, far beyond just worrying about security concerns and really getting into what happened in the event of a disaster. And how do we build a disaster recovery plan? What is a disaster recovery plan? Do I want a disaster recovery plan? And then what is a business continuity plan? Okay, so that's all. Everything I've said so far is entirely proactive. It is built on the idea of you haven't been attacked or you're not currently facing an attack that you're picking up the pieces from. You're not at all worried about what to actually do in the event that you're hacked. I do want to spend a brief amount of time going through that. It's a very simple decision. In terms of like a flow chart, it would be only like 2 or 3 different blocks. So let's talk about that for a minute. Let's say you are hacked. Let's say tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., you come into work, every one of your files encrypted, and you have an email from somebody in Estonia, and it says, hey, give us $5,000 by Monday, August 1st, or you're never going to get your files back. You really only have 3 options. It's the same 3 options no matter how this attack goes. Option the first one, restore from backup. If you are a client of Rocket IT and you have a managed backup through us, this is very quickly, instantly what we're going to do. We're going to find out where the attack occurred, shut that down, and then restore the files from backup. We have exhaustive copies of your backups, both locally and off-site. And so this is far and away the best thing to have happen if you get hacked, the best outcome. all of the other two options are much, much worse than this one. So one thing we didn't speak to in the prior section is, at least as far as ransomware goes, having a strong backup makes all the difference in the world. Also a requirement for the disaster recovery plan. Option 2, pay the ransom. So when these attacks originated, there was a program that started out called CryptoLocker. And CryptoLocker was the first program to encrypt files and ask for money that ever really made any waves. And what was strange about it is that if you actually paid the ransom, they would actually unencrypt your files. They would give you your files back, which is kind of odd. They broke into your computer. Obviously, they have no regard for trust or being honorable or the law. They took over your files, and then they asked for money. They're under real no compulsion to unencrypt the files for you. But very strangely, people did, and people happily paid the ransom to get their files back. Now, that is no guarantee, because now we're dealing with people all over the world, that if you paid the ransom, you will get the files back. Even worse, the government has gotten much better at tracking down these companies right when they pop up and start attacking. And so often the company's ability to communicate and receive money will be shut down before you even have a chance to pay the ransom. So it's possible that if you don't have a backup and you want to pay the ransom, that there's not even somebody to accept the ransom from you, and therefore your files will be lost forever. Which brings us to number 3, lose your data. So if you don't have a backup and you are unwilling or unable, because it's been shut down, to pay the ransom, then you lose your data. And so I don't much care to end on a somber note, but really, these are the 3 options. You either don't get hacked in the first place, or you restore from backup, pay the ransom, if that's even an option, or lose your data. And I'm imagining the fact that these are the prospects is why a lot of you have joined today. And so I do want to spend just 1 minute speaking about 2 services that Rocket IT provides. We have 2 ways of approaching this problem. One is entirely technology focused. So all the things I said about antivirus and filters and firewall level security, we have a solution that is a monthly subscription called Ideal Security that is built on the idea of, hey, let's get your technology in alignment. Let's make sure everything is great there. You say, great, I've got my own IT guys, I've got my own company that manages that, and I'm more worried about people and planning. No problem. Down towards the bottom of the slide, we have VCIO Security. And VCIO Security is built on the idea of, let's make sure that everything from phishing testing, security training, process control, and then disaster recovery and business continuity is taken care of. Let's make sure it stays up to date. Let's make sure it stays tested, which is a huge deal. Lots of people have a disaster recovery plan that they don't test. That plan's not worth very much because they don't even know if it works. So those are 2 solutions that we have that very directly address everything I've discussed today. Okay, with that, I really want to thank you guys for joining us today. I'm going to open it up to any questions that we have. So if you have questions, there's a Q&A module. And if you don't have any questions, then feel free to shoot us an email with any questions. There will be a recording of this that we will be sending out. So if you want to send it to anyone else in your organization or any friends or colleagues, that'll be fine. And I will be waiting just a minute here or 2 for any questions. Thanks. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. Jackie will be sending out a copy of the presentation in the next couple of days. I think most of you, at least from the list I've got here, have my email address. If you want to speak to any of the things I've discussed here, I'd love to chat with you. And we look forward to seeing you again in another webinar. Thanks.